right, welcome to the Young Turks. Momentous day. Later today, we will be launching a new show called Rebel Headquarters. That'll be immediately following the live broadcast that you're watching here. So, of course, presumably either you're watching live or later when you're a member, so you know this, but 6 to 8 o'clock Eastern is when we do the Young Turks. This new show, Rebel Headquarters, is gonna start at 8:05. So quick break and then it starts, and it will be a hub for all progressives in the country. We'll be talking to a lot of different candidates throughout the country that are progressives, and talking about progressive causes as well and organizations. Today we lead off with a very fitting story, as luck would have it, on the DNC Unity and Reform Commission. So that is going to be the lead story on Rebel Headquarters tonight at 8:05. Obviously before then, we got a full 2-hour show for you guys. There's actually even one encouraging story in today's show. It's about bullying, but about how celebrities and other folks across the country have stepped up for this little kid in Tennessee. That's a bit of a heartwarming story after we break your heart in the rest of the show. Anyway, that's gonna be in the second hour with Anna, and then later in this hour, Donald Trump's latest mad ramblings, including his habit of apparently watching television for 8 hours a day. Not like he's got anything better to do. That story is amazing, and then the blowback from it is amazing, and the list goes on and on. So, but we do have some serious news to start with, so let's go over here. Yet another attempted terrorist attack in New York, this time by a 27-year-old man. He is remarkably not killed, even though he tried to blow himself up. He had a suicide vest on, it appears, but because he is a buffoon and an incompetent, thank God, not surprising that a would-be terrorist would be an idiot. He did not succeed in blowing himself up or others around him. His name is Akayed Ullah. He apparently is from Bangladesh originally, although it's not clear if he was born here in America or not. That is where his family descends from. So now we have a video of the event, believe it or not. It's obviously gonna be a little bit grainy here. You're gonna see a finger pointing at the guy who's about to blow up, and he does, except like I said, the bomb didn't really quite work, so you'll see a lot of smoke, but even the perpetrator doesn't die afterwards. Let's watch.
No, he never took his hand out of the pocket.
So he did survive, and there was 3 other people who were injured. They also all survived. Thank God the 3 other people did not have serious injuries. So let me read you a tweet from the New York Police Department as they responded, and as you see the pictures, they showed up in full force. This was at 7:20 a.m. It was underground, under Port Authority, which is exactly in the middle of rush hour in New York City, and could have done a lot of damage if this bomb had actually exploded. Obviously, they had to take all the people who were commuting and direct them to other places so that they could find a way to get into New York City. And Port Authority was cleared out, a scene that New York hasn't seen in quite some time. So the New York Police Department put out a tweet saying, the NYPD is responding to reports of an explosion of unknown origin at 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. The AC and E line are being evacuated at this time. Info is preliminary, more when available. That was early on. They did obviously get the situation under control. Great job by the authorities here. And then now a description from the Associated Press of what happened. The improvised device was only partially detonated, officials said, characterizing the incident as an attempted terror attack. And then the AP went on to say, an anonymous law enforcement officials told the Associated Press that Ullah was inspired by the Islamic State group, but had apparently not had any direct contact with the group. The officials said he lives in Brooklyn and may be of Bangladeshi descent, as I told you a little earlier. So there's a lot of guys like this who don't actually coordinate with ISIS or even have any direct link to them at all. But for whatever reason, they feel like they have to act, and then they say, oh, I'm inspired by ISIS. So that seems to be the case here. What's weird is that I thought that all this was going to end when Donald Trump was elected. That's what he told me. It's been, well, almost 11 months since he's been in office. This is what, the second terrorist attack, at least in New York alone, since Trump's been in office. I thought my head was gonna start spinning because how much winning we were gonna do and how he was gonna, remember he had the secret plan to attack ISIS? So if you grant that this guy is from ISIS, whatever that means, well, why didn't Donald Trump employ his secret plan yet? What is he waiting for? Is he gonna wait for his term to be over before he employs his secret plan? There's some chance there was no secret plan, that Donald Trump is a moron and never had any new ideas on how to fight terrorism. And in fact, fighting terrorism is, as Trump would say, very complicated. Nobody knew it was this complicated. We knew. It's easy to say, oh, the Muslims or this or that, and look at issues in a black and white way. And then what are you gonna do about it? So, and how do you combat it? So you can profile Muslims all day long. You could do your Muslim travel ban. You could do demagoguery around that. The question is, how are you going to actually stop the bombings? See, that one's a little harder because you actually have to use your head and you have to actually, yes, use police work to try to find out who's gonna do it and to prevent them. But Donald Trump doesn't have that kind of competence. He doesn't have that kind of intelligence. He probably legitimately thought this because he is that stupid, that he would just get into office and go, it's a radical Islamic terror, and so that's it, I'm sure it's solved. Well, it turns out, knucklehead, it's not solved. That's not how it works. You actually have to do the hard work of figuring out who is going to do it. And yes, there has unfortunately been a lot of terrorist attacks, mass shootings, carnages, massacres since Trump has been elected. Rule of law, that's what he said he was gonna bring. It's now a sad joke. Not only do we not have safety, he continues to break the law every other day. Look, I'm frustrated because my friends and family are in New York. How many terrorist attacks do they have to go through? And so I want them safe. Just saying, oh, that group of people are particularly bad and we need to attack them isn't helping the issue. So serial killers are, unfortunately, statistically, generally white men, okay? Not all of them, but an overwhelming majority. How does that help me stop a serial killer? What should I do, profile all white men? That's such a stupid way of looking at it. No, you have to try to actually do the work to figure out who the people are going to be so you can stop them. Literally, our families and friends' lives are on the line here. You're supposed to be the president of the United States and do the hard work it takes to keep us safe. And he hasn't done any of that. And of course, his promises were complete and utter nonsense. So we're all united in our disgust of the terrorists and their actions. That is universal. No one doubts that. The right wing, the left wing, the middle wing, it doesn't matter. Nobody wants to see terrorists blow up our family and friends. The question is, how are we going to fight them? Unfortunately, Donald Trump lied about having a secret strategy, obviously doesn't have one, and hasn't stopped terrorism at all. Okay. Now, let's go to another story about terrorism. Okay, so this is amazing. So there was a story out right before the election about how 3 white supremacists were going to do a bombing in Wichita, a terrorist bombing. In fact, the FBI charged them with wanting to explode a weapon of mass destruction. Now, some of you might have seen this story if you were watching the Young Turks or reading outlets that care to have real coverage. Most of you probably haven't seen this because the 3 terrorists involved were white. So we don't, generally panic about that on cable news, and so you might, and certainly the president doesn't talk about it. No politicians generally talk about it, so it just gets buried, right? Well, there's an update to that story today, and it is an interesting one. So if you don't remember the story, they were going to bring in trucks filled with explosives and put them around an apartment building with Somali immigrants, and that was because they're Muslim. And they were going to show them, that they can't push us around. So they were going to do terrorism against the Muslims. But those particular Muslims hadn't done anything. But this is how the small-minded people in America and across the world think. Oh, me no do nuance, Muslim bad. Should I find out who the actual terrorist is? No. Muslim bad, must do something about Muslim. So these guys thought, well, I got a great idea. Muslims must be bad, and why are they bad? Because of terrorism. Okay, so their ironic idea was, let's do terrorism against them. Let's blow them up. In the middle of Kansas, not in Somalia, in the middle of Kansas. So they were caught, thank God, and the FBI did wonderful work there. And there's an update to that story today. So let me go to the Associated Press for that. Gavin Wright, Patrick Stein, and Curtis Allen are charged with conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction and conspiracy against civil rights for allegedly planning to detonate truck bombs in the meatpacking town of Garden City the day after November 2016 election. Wright also faces a charge of lying to the FBI. Now, these geniuses thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win and that Donald Trump was going to be robbed. Oh, that's another conspiracy theory on the right that didn't turn out to be true. Where are the FEMA camps? Where are the FEMA camps? There are no FEMA camps either. There was all these lunatic right-wing conspiracy theories, and it unfortunately led people to doing some terrible things. So they thought, okay, we'll show Hillary Clinton when she wins, we'll blow up these Muslims, murder them all, and then as one of the conspirators said, we'll get their attention with, quote, a bloodbath, okay? Well, they're asking for something unique today as their trial is about to get started. 3 men accused of plotting to bomb a mosque and an apartment complex housing Somali refugees asked a federal judge Friday to include prospective jurors from rural western Kansas because they are twice as likely to have voted for President Donald Trump. Now, wait a minute, I thought Donald Trump was against terrorism. But it is the belief of these 3 terrorists that Donald Trump voters don't mind terrorism if it's white terrorism against Muslims. Now, to be fair to the Donald Trump voters in Kansas, we don't know that that's true. That's what these 3 terrorists are hoping for. So, but it is an interesting story that we actually do have terrorists in America and that Donald Trump has not tweeted about them, has not gone on a rampage about them, has not made national headlines about them. It's not that big a deal to them. And now those guys think, well, Trump voters are more likely to excuse terrorism. That's their belief. That's what they're arguing for. Please give me jurors that voted for Donald Trump because I think they're more likely to be okay with terrorism. As long as it is white people, right-wing people doing the terrorism against innocent Muslims. They think, and I don't know, they might have some basis for this belief, that hey, Trump voters are gonna think, not so bad, not guilty. That's what they're hoping for. They also argue the case will require jurors to weigh whether the alleged conduct constitutes a crime or whether it is constitutionally protected speech and assembly and the right to bear arms. Who knows? Maybe if they get those Trump voters, they'll think, well, I mean, yeah, I got a right to bear trucks full of explosives. Now, that's what we're stretching the Second Amendment to now? Trucks full of explosives. Do Muslims have that right here in America? Do black people have that right here in America? I'd hope not. But now the right wing is saying, I get to walk around with explosives ready to blow up innocent civilians, and that's my right to bear arms. Look, I don't think these are going to work, okay? But you never know. I mean, we've had a lot of insane acquittals in this country, just as long as the people on that jury felt like they identified with the defendant. And constitutionally protected speech. Yeah, your speech ends at the end of a bomb, okay? I know the right wing likes to say, free speech, I'm allowed to hate everybody. I'm allowed to hate blacks, Muslims, Latinos, gays, I'm allowed to hate them. I know you are, and I defend that right of yours oftentimes. You don't have a right to bomb them or murder them. That is a different thing, and oftentimes, unfortunately, they don't understand that. These guys are gonna go on trial soon. I hope that the judge will reject their demands for hateful people that they think might excuse terrorism. They should just get a jury of their peers wherever they are and be done with that. They don't get to, in my opinion, pick a jury of their peers if they think there's enough right-wing lunatics in Kansas who are gonna say that it's okay to murder innocent Muslims in the middle of Kansas. They should not be allowed to do that, and I hope that they face the justice that they richly deserve, and whatever the consequence of that in Kansas might be. It's amazing the different reactions both politicians and the media give to different stories. I know I've said it a million times, but and you know it too. You know, even if you're the most right-wing guy, you know it in your heart. You know it in your whatever little there is of your brain. If 3 Muslim guys went and did packed up explosives in trucks and put them around a building and said, "We can't wait to create a bloodbath of these Christians, these white Christians in America." You don't think that would have been on the news 24/7? That you would have heard about it nonstop, and then people would have used it to say, "Oh, that's it. The Muslims are coming, and they ought to be banned, and they're dangerous, and they're inherently and uniquely dangerous because of their beliefs." You would have heard it nonstop, which would have helped the demagoguery against one particular ethnic group. But when it's white right-wingers, kids gloves, barely talk about it. Okay, yes, these monsters, these terrorists do live among us. And luckily this time they were caught. And like I said, I hope they are brought to as much justice as humanly possible. Young Turks. back on the Young Turks. We got a lot of stories for you guys. I will get to tweets later in the program and your reactions to those stories in a little bit. But let's go over here and get started again on more stories, okay? So, here's one thing I know for sure. Fox News, Donald Trump, and the Republicans, they care about fake news. And they are worried if anyone makes a mistake, they think it is monumentally important, they should be fired immediately. I know that partly because of what's happened over the weekend. So Dave Weigel, reporter for the Washington Post, tweeted a picture he shouldn't have tweeted. I'll give you the full context. First, let's go to the New York Times for the explanation. The reporter, they explained, Dave Weigel, posted a picture of an arena with many empty seats. He deleted the tweet after learning that the venue had not yet filled up. So that was a mistake that he made, and he has admitted to that mistake, and then he took down the tweet because he didn't want anyone to get the wrong impression. But Donald Trump was not satisfied. Let's go to his tweet on this issue. Now, he shows the one that Weigel tweeted in the up top there, where the stadium is not filled, and then the accurate pictures of the stadium actually filled during the event. Donald Trump is right about that, and Weigel knows that. In fact, Weigel knew about it before Trump even tweeted this, but Trump says, Weigel, Washington Post, put out a phony photo of an empty arena hours before I arrived at the venue with thousands of people outside on their way in. Real photos now shown as I spoke. Packed house, many people unable to get in. Demand apology and retraction from fake news Washington Post, okay? Well, no problem, because by the time he tweeted that, Dave Weigel, on his own account, had taken that down, and it was not part of any Washington Post article, so there was nothing for Washington Post to take down. But furthermore, he got the apology that he was looking for. And I think Weigel did the right thing here. And as frustrating as it is to apologize to Donald Trump, who's never apologized for a single thing he's ever done wrong, let alone the 800 lies that were documented by the New York Times in his first 6 months. But it doesn't matter, you still have to do the morally right thing, and I think Weigel did. And he said, it was a bad tweet on my personal account, not a story for the Washington Post. I deleted it after like 20 minutes, very fair to call me out. And so that's basically his apology for the tweet and to President Trump. Now, if you ever give an inch to the right wing, are they satisfied? Never. They don't just want your apology, they want your head. They don't care if you're right or wrong anyway. It's just an opportunity for them. So then Trump tweets, well, Dave Weigel of the Washington Post just admitted that his picture was a fake fraud, question mark, showing an almost empty arena last night for my speech in Pensacola, when in fact, he knew the arena was packed, as shown also on TV. Fake news, he should be fired. Now, wait a minute. He took down the picture and the tweet well before you were calling for him to get fired, etc. So what else did you want him to do? And by the way, if he had intended it to be fake, why wouldn't he just leave it up? Why wouldn't the Washington Post then write a huge article about it and go, nobody came? Because I thought that's what they did with your inauguration. I thought that's what you charged them with doing it all the time. So if it was really fake, like fake and intended to be fake, as you charged in one of your tweets that I just read you, why not leave it up? Why not insist that it's true? Why ever do a correction? But it seems like that the mainstream media, and I believe that they have an inherent bias, an establishment bias, and I think if the right wing says they have a bias, I think that they are seeing it a little wrong in my opinion. If they think it's a liberal media, I think they're seeing it wrong. But I think it's perfectly fair for them to say there's a bias. I say there's a bias in the media. But if you say that they're making stuff up, why wouldn't they just continue to make it up? Why would they ever do a retraction? Why would they ever do a correction? Why did they suspend Brian Ross, ABC News? If the whole point is to make up stuff about Donald Trump, wouldn't they give Brian Ross a bonus? Wouldn't they say, Dave Weigel, great job on having the wrong picture up for a whole 20 minutes. Congratulations, you get a raise. But they haven't done any of that. They correct things immediately. You know why? Because they actually care about the truth. Now, they might not always get there, in my opinion, because of the bias they don't even realize they have. But are they all in a room making conspiracies against Donald Trump just to smear him and then write those articles and then never retract them? No, there is an organization that does that, but in favor of Donald Trump and against Democrats. That organization is called Fox News. Do they ever fire anyone? Do they ever suspend anyone? Do they ever do any of that stuff? Never. Just at the end of last week, we told you about the story of how Fox News said that one of Roy Moore's accusers had forged his signature and the yearbook. Well, it turns out she hadn't. She had added a note underneath Roy Moore's note, but Fox News ran the headline, forged. Later, to their credit, they did an update and said, oh, okay, turns out it wasn't a forgery. She had just simply added a note. But the person who initially reported that, are they fired? Are they suspended? No, look, I'm not calling for that, but the right wing keeps calling for it every time it happens in the rest of the media. So why is Fox News immune from any of this? Because the reality is we expect them to make nonstop mistakes. We expect them to lie, to mislead their audience. That is part and parcel of what they do. In fact, they did it in this story. So the Washington Post never fired Dave Weigel, nor should they. But nonetheless, watch what happens on Fox News.
This machine operating in certain news outlets that, frankly, they identify themselves as part of the so-called resistance. They're the opposition, and they're getting tagged over and over and over again, pimping this fake news. And I think it's inexcusable.
You talk about this, and at least for one reporter, it turned out to be inexcusable because he doesn't have a job anymore, and that's from the Washington Post. He put up this tweet with a pretty sarcastic comment about where the president was giving his speech. He said, packed to the rafters, in a picture that was taken long before the speech began. And then the president demanded an apology. He apologized, and now he since has left.
He has not left. He has not been fired. Fake news. That's what Fox News is. Fake news. I demand everybody be fired. That's anchor Leland Wittert. Luckily, I'd never seen him before. It's okay. I'm sure Fox News fired him immediately because they say, I mean, in that segment, they're talking about Weigel, needs to be fired. It has already been fired. I can't believe they did fake news like this. There's no accountability. I want every producer at Fox News that worked on that program to be fired. I want the executive producers fired. I want the editors fired. I want all the executives to be fired. That's how they react, right? No, the guy made a mistake. So he came on and he said this.
I want to correct a mistake from earlier. I misspoke when talking about the controversy surrounding Washington Post reporter Dave Weigel. While the president demanded on Twitter that Weigel be fired, he is still with the Washington Post. And I want, with that, to apologize for my mistake.
If I was the right wing, not good enough. Let's burn him at the stake, right? No, yeah, I got it. You made a mistake and you corrected it. That's what people who care about getting it right do. I'm surprised that Fox News bothered to correct that. If you remember, Bill O'Reilly had dozens of lies about his so-called reporting during the wars, far more egregious than Brian Williams. He had preposterous lies about his connection to the JFK killing and was never held accountable. Did all those sexual harassment, was never held accountable, only until after it became public. The number of times and the severity of his sexual harassment was Bill O'Reilly finally fired, but not for the lies. Not for the lies that he gave over and over and over again. And of course, on the story about the so-called forgery, Breitbart and all the conservative online organizations have never corrected their story because it's not their job to do the news, it's their job to do propaganda. So let's acknowledge that there's an enormous double standard, there's no question about it, and that there are never any consequences for any conservative that ever gets a story wrong, even if for some of them, they did it on purpose to mislead you and their audience and everyone else. So, and let's also acknowledge that yes, the mainstream media, when they get something wrong, they try to correct it. It is not an attempt to mislead. If it was, they just simply leave it up, and they don't. It gets exhausting battling their lies day after day after day. And then they have the audacity and turn around and talk about fake news. You got elected, President Trump, because of fake news. So don't pretend that you care about it when you revel in it. Okay, so now speaking of Trump's problems, let's go to an even more serious issue, okay? Now, recently, President Trump has been talking about the Antiquities Act. Now, that's the thing that allows us to take national monuments and declare them as such, protect public lands. It is for the purpose of preserving those lands for the public. That's a fact, no one disputes that, okay? But for whatever reason, Donald Trump said that this was, quote, a massive giveaway. A massive giveaway to who? It preserves it for the public. So is Donald Trump complaining about how lands protected for the public is a giveaway to the public? That's a bizarre way of putting it, right? But then he started talking about the, quote, abuse of the Antiquities Act. Well, who's abusing it and for what purpose? Is the public abusing it? Is there some sort of secret private organization that's going to do drilling? Oh, hold on, let's get to that in a second. But for now, he was complaining about Obama protecting more public lands, okay? He went on to explain, abuses have not just threatened your local economies, they've threatened your very way of life. Preserving public lands has somehow threatened our very way of life? How so? But it gets more dramatic. He says, they've threatened your hearts. I didn't know that preserving a public land in Utah was going to somehow endanger my heart. Man, that is strong language. I wonder where he's going with this. He promised that he would reverse federal overreach and restore the rights of this land to your citizens. Public lands will once again be for public use. But they're for public use now. That's what you're trying to change. Their Orwellian tactics are unprecedented. I know that people have used Orwellian tricks before, but they literally do the exact opposite of what they claim. What Donald Trump wants to do is take away public lands, privatize them. But he just said that, oh, that I will make them public again. There's only two possible explanations. One is he revels in lying to you and telling you the exact opposite. Watch these idiots. I'm going to take away public lands and then I'm going to tell them that I'm doing it to make them public. And then we'll rob him blind. And I'm going to get to how he's robbing you in a second. Or he's so stupid that whoever wants to trick him into it goes, hey, look, I just want to mine in these public lands. Let's tell Trump that making them non-public will somehow make them public. He'll believe it, he's a moron. Either way, it does not speak well of the president. So his Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, who's executing these plans, said, now, wait a minute, taking away these public lands, okay? And they just announced a massive carve-away from these public lands at Bear Ears and at Grand Staircase Escalante. And it's the biggest takeaway of public lands in American history, okay? But Zinke promises, quote, this is not about energy. There is no mine within Bear's Ears. Now, you're gonna be shocked to find out it's about energy. Not only that, get a load of this, it's about uranium. The thing that Donald Trump just complained about in regards to the Democrats. Oh, uranium won. Why isn't Hillary Clinton being investigated? Why hasn't she been arrested? Mueller was the head of the FBI at the time. Mueller's got a problem, Obama had a problem. Uranium, uranium, uranium. It turns out they want to privatize our public lands in case of Bear's Ears so that they could do uranium mining. All right, let me go to the Washington Post for the story. The uranium company launched a concerted lobbying campaign to scale back Bear's Ears National Monument, saying such action would give it easier access to the area's uranium deposits and help it operate a nearby processing mill, according to documents obtained by the Washington Post. So the company's Energy Fuels Resources. Turns out they lobbied the Trump administration. Give me that public land. Uranium prices are a little low now, but we think that they're going to go up for a number of reasons related to the markets. So we want to be ready to mine that area, and it's inconvenient to us. Now look, conservationists are against it. Actually, some conservatives are against it because if it's public land, you could fish, you could hunt, you could do different things because it's reserved for you, not for private corporations. Navajo have complained about it because in the past there has been uranium drilling in that area and mines, and guess what happened? It leaked into their water supply and poisoned them. So they are concerned about that. So nonetheless, of course, the Trump administration goes forward. In a May 25th letter to the Interior Department Chief Operating Officer Mark Chalmers wrote that 1.35 million acre expanse Obama created could, quote, affect existing and future mill operations. So internally, they're very clear about why they want this. The company says, here, I'm lobbying your Trump administration, and I want to open up the public lands because it could have existing and future mill operations that we'd like to run. It's simple old corruption. Now remember, we've given you guys a lot of money, we spent a lot of money lobbying, so do as you're told by your donors. And they can do and they are doing. So Mark Chalmers said, There are also many other known uranium and vanadium deposits located within the original boundaries that could provide valuable energy and mineral resources in the future. And that's the Energy Fuels Resources COO. Wait, I thought it wasn't about the energy. No, Ryan Zinke's a liar? I would have never guessed. Donald Trump was lying when he said taking away public lands would somehow make them more public, and that it didn't have anything to do with his donors. No, tell me it ain't so. More details from the Washington Post. Energy Fuels Resources did not just weigh in on national monuments through public comment letters. It hired a team of lobbyists at Fager Baker Daniels, led by Andrew Wheeler, who's awaiting Senate confirmation as the Environmental Protection Agency's deputy secretary. I'm going to get back to him in a second, to work on the matter and other federal policies affecting the company. It paid the firm $30,000 between January 1st and September 30th, according to federal lobbying records, for work on this and other priorities. So did you understand that? That guy, Andrew Wheeler, he is part of this meeting where they're talking about how they want to privatize these lands. But he's not in the meeting as part of the government. At the time, he's the lobbyist for the uranium company. Then Trump decides uranium company is so right, let's do a crooked deal and let's take away public lands and let them mine on it. And that guy who was the top lobbyist for them in that meeting, I like that crooked son of a bitch so much, I'm going to appoint him to be the deputy secretary for the Environmental Protection Agency, where he can then work for those same energy companies in destroying our environmental regulations. They have no qualms. They have no conscience. They have no shame. There is no bottom to that barrel. He's awaiting confirmation now. Republicans, are you going? I'm sure they will. Oh, whoa, this guy's the guy who robbed Utah and the country of public lands because of some lobbying that he did. Maybe we should put him as the deputy secretary of the EPA. You're going to do that? They probably will, because that's the whole point of their entire party is corruption. Okay, one last thing here. The company's vice president of operations, William Paul Goranson, joined Wheeler and two other lobbyists, including former Congresswoman Mary Bona, Republican of California, to discuss Bears Ears in a July 17th meeting with two top Zinke advisors. When asked about that meeting, they're like, well, it wasn't necessarily about the mines. Well, maybe it was about the mines, but we just had a small conversation about the uranium mines. Well, that small conversation has led to a giant effect, which is that they're going to take away our public lands so that Republican donors can get uranium out of our land. You want to know a uranium controversy? That's it right there. Young Turks. All right, I'm going to read some tweets real quick because a lot of you had questions about Rebel Headquarters. That's the new show starting today on TYT Network, hosted by myself. So let me address those. Lucifer, first of all, says, I cannot count how many retweets I have come across of Nomiki Khan's awesome oration this weekend. That was at the DNC Unity and Reform Commission, and we have that as the lead story tonight on Rebel Headquarters on the very first show, so don't miss it. So that's at 8:05 p.m. Eastern tonight live. Vance asks, how often is this new segment going to be? Dates, times, average appearance. Monday through Thursday, every day live at 8:05 to 8:30. So right after the Young Turks, you'll have Rebel Headquarters Monday through Thursday for a half-an-hour show, okay? Inga Smith asks, please tell me if the new show starts right after TYT show. Will there not be a post-game anymore, or will this new show not be live? Please tell us, thanks. Yeah, the show will be live and the post-game will be after Rebel Headquarters, okay? So yes, we'll still have a post-game for the members, and the members will also get to watch Rebel Headquarters whenever they want. So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member. And finally, one more tweet for you guys. Joshua Caliendo says, watching TYT live before I do calling for Justice Democrats, 8 to 10. So awesome, love it. Thank you for actually making a difference by participating in Justice Democrats and watching independent media like us. By the way, on Rebel Headquarters, we will certainly have some of the Justice Democratic candidates. We'll also have non-Justice Democratic candidates, other progressives in the country, and progressive organizations like Our Revolution. So now, let me give you the rest of the stories in the first hour, okay? All right. Now, you know all those stories about Roy Moore and how he molested girls between the ages of 14 and 18 when he was in his 30s. I don't want to rehash all that stuff. I want to talk about the other lunatic ravings of Roy Moore and what he might actually do, or push for at least, if he gets any degree of power. And a United States senator has a lot of power. So first of all, he was asked at one point, what was the good time in America? When was America great? And he answered slavery. Now I'm going to share that with you in a second. Then I'm going to share with you a video where he talks about how maybe we should take away the amendments that ended slavery. You're thinking, come on, he couldn't have said that. Wait and you'll see, okay? But I want you to have the proper context for the first clip on slavery. No one asked him about it. He's not responding to that as an issue that was brought up. He brought it up. When was America great? During the time of slavery. Now, but I'll give you the full context. Here it is.
Trump mean? What does people mean make it great again?
I think we've been striving for that greatness all the way through. I think you're right about that. And I think it was great in the minds of those who formed the Declaration, although they were not perfect people, they had problems. I think it was great at a time when families were united. Even though we had slavery, they cared for one another. People were strong in the families. Our families were strong. Our country had a direction, and we corrected many of the problems. Today I see our families divided. Greatness I see was in our culture. Not in all our policies. There were problems. We had slavery. We've overcome slavery. We've had prejudice, we still have prejudice, but we've turned the tide on civil rights, and we've done a lot of things to bring this country around. And I think we can still make it better.
Now, when we covered that at the end of last week, I said that it's a bizarre answer. It comes from only a white right-wing perspective, because he talks about how during slavery families were kept together. Well, not for blacks. They were literally torn apart, and we showed you passages from back in the day where, in fact, it talked about, oh, my son was, ripped from my arms 16 years ago and sold off. Has anybody seen him, etc. Now you know the whole history behind that. But Anna on the show said no, that I think he's doing it on purpose to stoke up racial animosity and to get racists to vote for him. And I was a tiny bit skeptical about that. I think that it was mainly his perspective that is so wrong, and I think that it was outrageous comments to begin with, don't get me wrong. But was he doing it on purpose to try to get racist votes, to out of the thin blue air to say America was great when we had slavery? I mean, he did say afterwards, that, hey, we got rid of slavery and that's a good thing, right? So, well, now we have more context that might let us decide that. So he went on a show called Aristook Watchman, whatever that means. Now, even going on this show shows you how extreme he is, because on the show they claim that the federal government itself is acting illegally and has been, quote, hijacked, which means Americans are not required to follow their laws. They also believe that many state laws are illegitimate and, quote, repugnant to the Constitution. So he's going on an extreme right-wing anti-government show, even though he's trying to be a United States senator. The guys on the show tell you oftentimes, not every time, but oftentimes, don't listen to the law. Rule of law, they're literally against the rule of law. So he goes on this insane show and proceeds to say insane things. Now he's going to talk about the amendments after the Bill of Rights. You know what some of the amendments were? To take away slavery, give women the right to vote, among many other amendments that made America what it is today, a far more perfect union, not at all perfect, but I would argue, and I think most rational human beings would argue, women having the right to vote, blacks not being slaves were good things. Not for Roy Moore. Listen in.
Personally, I would like to see an amendment that says all the amendments after 10.
Yes. That would eliminate many problems. People don't understand how some of these amendments have completely tried to wreck the form of government that our forefathers intended. Specifically, I think it's the 17th Amendment election of senators.
That's right. The 17th Amendment needs to be repealed. People don't understand, and from being from the South, I bet you get it, the 14th Amendment was only approved at the point of a gun.
Yeah, it had very serious problems with its approval by the states.
I believe that the 14th Amendment is what they strangle us with. I believe the 14th Amendment makes us not state citizens, not sovereign individuals, but owned by the federal corporation. I believe that is the way the 14th Amendment has turned out.
Well, the danger in the 14th Amendment, which was to restrict, has been a restriction on the states using the first 10 amendments, by and through the 14th Amendment, to restrict the states from doing something that the federal government was restricted from doing, and allowing the federal government to do something which the first 10 amendments prevented them from doing. If you understand the incorporation doctrine used by the courts and what it meant, you'd understand what I'm talking about.
So let's break down what these lunatics are talking about. This is from a radio interview in 2011. So when he was a young man in his 60s, I guess. Number one, they're talking about the 17th Amendment. That's direct election of senators. So some lunatics in the right wing think that we should not have direct election. In the old days, those senators were appointed, and that led to out of control corruption, where the companies, corporations would simply like buy senators. They say, okay, I want this guy appointed, I'm gonna give you X amount of money and you appoint this guy. People were sick of that corruption, and so they passed an amendment saying, no, we need to elect our senators because it's a democracy. These lunatics are still fighting that old battle. No, God, I love the corrupt old days. Democracy, we don't want democracy for senators. Let's just go back to appointing them. All the corporations bought them anyway. Aren't you guys thrilled with that? Isn't that enough for you? Okay, so then they move on to the 14th Amendment. In case there's any lack of clarity, in the beginning, Roy Moore said that he had problems with the amendments after the Bill of Rights. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments are after the Bill of Rights. They freed the slaves, those 3 amendments. But if you aren't confused as to whether they were referring to that, then they start talking about the 14th Amendment and how wrong it was. Not only did the 13th through 15th Amendments free the slaves, but it also gave them rights. I'm sure that they are livid about that as well, including due process rights. But it also gave all of us due process rights. And that's part of what they're so angry about. The states, we used to be able to keep slaves and do whatever the hell we wanted and crush people. Now the federal government says everybody's got rights, even the blacks. Isn't that terrible, Roy Moore? Oh, terrible. Oh yeah, the 14th Amendment was forced upon us. Who's us? Who's us? I'm pretty sure the 14th Amendment wasn't forced upon African Americans. It was quite the opposite. They were thrilled because it freed them. It gave them freedom, the thing you pretend to care about, but it's actually a punchline to you because you're all naturally fascists. So you would easily take away the 14th Amendment and enslave people again. Because all Roy Moore cares about is that Roy Moore and people who look like him are in charge. So even if you put aside that he's a predator and a child molester, this guy is abhorrent in every other way. Right now, the polls have him leading in the state of Alabama for a Senate seat, for a United States Senate seat. Because Alabama Republicans, not only do they apparently not care about child molestation, but they think, did we really have to free the slaves? The 14th Amendment, do we really need that? Well, you might say, hey, some of them might not know about that. Well, you know about it now, and you just heard it from his own voice. I bet you they vote for Roy Moore anyway. Even if he loses, he will get an astounding number of votes from Republican voters in Alabama. We'll see if he wins or loses tomorrow. But either way, this does not speak well of the Republicans in Alabama. A guy like this should have never had a chance in any party in the year 2017. But in some parts of the country, for Republicans, Roy Moore is just their kind of guy. Okay. Now let's go to what they're doing about the issue of the child molestation. Okay. So Roy Moore has a problem. He has a lot of different problems, but top on everybody's mind because of how much it's been talked about is how he molested girls who were 14 and 16 years old. He tried to rape a 16-year-old according to her charges. And those charges appear to be incredibly credible. And in fact, most of the Republican leadership, not Donald Trump is supporting him fully, making calls on his behalf today. The RNC has gone back to supporting Roy Moore. But some Republicans like Mitch McConnell, even his person who could be his colleague by the end of tomorrow, Richard Shelby, the other Republican senator from Alabama, has come out and said, no, he's not gonna be voting for him. They believe the women and they believe that Roy Moore had done these horrific things. Most reasonable people have seen the evidence and completely believe it. So what's Roy Moore's campaign gonna do? Smear 101, attack the victims. Classy guys they are. So there's an internal Roy Moore campaign memo that Vox has uncovered, and it explains. We have prepared a primer that lists the fake, quote unquote, fake news put out by 4 women, followed by some of the evidence and responses that has been uncovered and that show the claims to be entirely false. So not only call it fake news, but call the women liars. So let's get into the details. Brian Resnick, reporting for Vox, explains the evidence that the accusations are untrue chiefly rely on Breitbart News and at times the Moore campaign itself. Some of the efforts to discredit the claims attack the character of the accusers. So they also cite other nonsense conservative websites like Daily Wire, among others. And my favorite is, they're like, no, it's true that they're liars. And here it is on Roy Moore's website. Oh, I see it. Unbiased source like Roy Moore's website. And then they will take Roy Moore being quoted in other publications and go, see, that publication ran a quote from Roy Moore, hence it must be true. Everything else they ran, wrong, but Roy Moore's quote is obviously a fact. So I get it, they gotta fool themselves into believing this, they have to mainly fool their own supporters and volunteers that he didn't do it. But to me, attacking the victims is the worst thing. And I talked about this a lot in the context of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton hadn't done anything along these lines, but when he had the affair with Monica Lewinsky, I thought he should not be impeached over that. But the way they smeared Monica Lewinsky, saying that basically she was lying about it and wanted the attention, was deplorable. And I've been calling it out ever since, and it was hideous that they did that. Now, wait till you get a load of what the Moore camp is doing, okay? So they're gonna go one by one through the accusers. Now, they're gonna name names here. I want you to understand they're lying, so don't take these as facts about any of these women, okay? But this is their line of attack. In the first case, it charges that Tina Johnson, who says Moore groped her in a law office, has, quote, pled guilty to writing bad checks and third-degree theft of property. So, in other words, she says she was groped. Don't worry about whether she was actually groped or not. Don't worry about whether she was molested. Just say she's a criminal. Say she's a criminal and smear her. These people are gross. Okay, now on to Nelson. This is the one that says that Moore tried to rape her and push her head down into his lap when she was 16 years old. It says that Nelson, quote, didn't even tell her then boyfriend who picked her up shortly after the supposed assault. So, as a 16-year-old, she made the mistake of trusting a district attorney to drive her home. He tries to rape her and then afterwards throws her out onto the pavement when she starts screaming and then takes off. When her boyfriend shows up, you think that's the first thing she's gonna tell him? It might be. It might certainly well be, and for a lot of women it would be. But some women might think, especially when they're 16, oh my God, I got into the car with that guy. What are people gonna think? And that guy's a district attorney, and he just told her before he threw her out of the car, you're a little girl, and I'm a district attorney. Who do you think they're gonna believe? Because that's what predators do. Now, she went on to tell that story to others who have now confirmed that she did tell that story many years ago before Roy Moore was running for anything. So they actually do have excellent, credible witnesses from the time. But their one strand is, well, she didn't tell her boyfriend right after the attempted rape, hence she must be a liar. These people are gross, but it's about to get a little worse. The final one. The document notes that Leah Korfman, who has said Moore pursued her when she was 14 and he was in his 30s, had, quote, disciplinary and behavioral problems at the time. Why? Did she get detention in junior high? Is that what you guys are going for now? Saying, oh, that 14-year-old, what did she get, an in-school suspension at her junior high? How do you, as you write the memo, how do you live with yourself, man? How do you not quit on the spot? As you read the memo about how you're gonna attack a woman back when she was a 14-year-old, when you've seen the credible allegations that he actually took her into the woods and found a way to separate her from her mom, stripped her nearly naked, and then got her to try to touch his genitals. But she had disciplinary problems in junior high? How do you live with yourself, man? And these are the people, you can't say they don't know. Maybe some ignorant voters in Alabama will say, oh, I didn't know the details. I didn't read the details. I just know I like Republicans and I don't like Democrats. That's no excuse. But these people, no excuse on top of no excuse. You work for Roy Moore. You know what happened. And now you're gonna go back in time to try to smear a young girl who was attacked. And then they say they're the party of morality. You'll excuse the rest of us if we don't believe that at all. In fact, we think it might be just the opposite. Okay, now let's go to Trump's accusers. So Donald Trump has been accused by at least 16 women of different instances of sexual harassment, sexual assault. Now, I know that Democrats recently stepped down for similar issues, John Conyers, Al Franken, and at the time, I said that Franken and Conyers should be investigated. Conyers stepping down makes all the sense in the world, and then when Franken stepped down, I said, well, why shouldn't Trump have the same standards? Well, today, some of his accusers have come forward and they're asking the same exact question because it's a logical one. It's a rational one that any decent person would ask. You know, they went on Megyn Kelly's program. They also did a press conference with Brave New Films. Robert Greenwald's shooting a movie about this, and you guys should all check it out because it's a powerful and interesting story. And one of the accusers, Lisa Boynt, said, this is something that is so horrific. I'm so fed up of listening to people. We take it in like it's nothing. We shouldn't teach our boys to talk like this, referring to the Hollywood Access tapes, or Access Hollywood tapes. And by the way, a lot of the accusers said we shouldn't get have our kids learn these lessons, whether it's Al Franken or Donald Trump, and that this is not a partisan issue, okay? But Lisa Boyne also said, look, if we're being honest, quote, what Trump did was, quote, 1,000 times worse than what Al Franken has done. Now remember, Trump on several occasions is accused of just grabbing the woman's genitals, exactly as he said on the Access Hollywood tape that he had done in the past. So yes, very, very bad, okay? And Rachel Crooks, who's another one of the Trump's accusers, said, if they were willing to investigate Senator Franken, I think it's only fair that they do the same for Trump. We shouldn't let politicians get away with this. So that does seem fair, and that's why as soon as Al Franken resigned, we put out a petition, which now is getting a lot of traction, rightfully so, saying tytnetwork.com/resign, saying that if Al Franken stepped down, and he did, now that Al Franken has stepped down, Donald Trump should clearly step down for far worse behavior towards women. Why do we have two different standards? It makes no sense at all. We'll have the link to that petition in the description box. Also over here in the corner, if you hit that eye, you'll see links there. If you're watching on YouTube, on Facebook, we'll have it in the comments section. Look, Kirsten Gillibrand said something very similar to what I said on air that day. She's now coming out and talking about how Trump should resign as well. She's a senator from New York. Let me give you her quotes. She said, President Trump should resign. These allegations are credible, they are numerous. I've heard these women's testimony and many of them are heartbreaking, and President Trump should resign his position. She went on to say, whether he will ever hold himself accountable is something you really can't hold your breath for. Congress should have hearings, they should do their investigation, they should have appropriate investigations of his behavior and hold him accountable. If they were going to investigate Al Franken, why in the world are they not investigating Donald Trump? Yes, Congress can investigate, but only if there's enough pressure. I said on the day that we launched the petition, I'm not naive enough to think that if we got 1 million people to sign the petition that Donald Trump would go, oh golly gee, I guess I should resign. But perhaps it could do things exactly as Senator Gillibrand is talking about, which is start an investigation just as you would have for Conyers, for Franken, for Trent Franks, Republican or Democrat, and see what that investigation unfolds. At least create that pressure. That's why I want you to sign the petition, and I want there to be an uprising over this, because these issues are monumentally important. And I think some of the Democrats have done the right thing in at least owning up to it. Donald Trump has not owned up to it. He should not be rewarded for that. The Republicans turn around and go, ha, if you ever admitted anything, it's your fault and you gotta go. But we can do all the wrongdoing in the world and we're never going to admit it, and so I'm saying it's not true. Well, good, then let's have a congressional investigation and find out if you should be forced to resign just as others have. And by the way, Trent Franks is a Republican, he also resigned. So why are we holding Donald Trump to a different standard? It should be the same standard. Gillibrand is right, Cory Booker's now talked about this. Bernie Sanders was the first to bring it up. And Jeff Merkley and another senator has also now said that he should resign based on this. At a bare minimum, they should have an investigation to find out what Donald Trump actually did. And Donald Trump says he's always innocent. Great, then I'm sure the investigation will show that. My guess is it'll show what he actually did. And if we're to have any kind of decency and consistency in America, at a bare minimum, Congress should do that investigation. And then if it proves to be what it looks like in public right now, then he should resign just like everyone else. Okay, now, one last story for you guys about Trump. New York Times with a deep dive into Donald Trump's daily life. Very important and interesting. Important for us to get a sense of the rhythm of the president, how he makes his decisions, what does he do day to day, what briefings is he consuming, what information is he getting, because he's gonna lead him to make monumentally important decisions. He's the most powerful man on earth. Well, luckily they did a lot of work on this. They interviewed over 60 people who are current associates, former associates, colleagues of Donald Trump, insiders that know the man. So they got a sense of his patterns and what he does. So let me begin to share that with you. It's Maggie Haberman, Peter Baker, and before he was suspended, Glenn Thrush worked on this, not afterwards. So some great reporting here from those reporters. They said around 5:30 each morning, President Trump wakes and tunes into the television in the White House's master bedroom. He flips to CNN for news, moves to Fox and Friends for comfort and messaging ideas, and sometimes watches MSNBC's Morning Joe because friends suspect it fires him up for the day. Now, when you ask him, he says, Morning Joe is failing, I know I don't watch that. CNN's fake news, I don't watch that. But his friends and colleagues have told reporters, of course he watches it. He might hate watch it, but he watches it. One of the people he watches is Jeanine Pirro, who's, if you ever watch 5 minutes of her show on Fox News, is a total maniac. Right now, she's calling for a purge of the FBI and to arrest all of Trump's political opponents. She, under the guise of, I think they might have done something wrong, maybe they helped Hillary Clinton, it doesn't really matter, let's lead them out in handcuffs, she said. She's apparently such a lunatic that she came in and met with Trump. She's meeting with these people, and she went on a rant for over an hour until even Trump walked out, was like, okay, that's enough. And just walked out of the meeting. But he does watch her. So they explain he watches Miss Pirro and her fellow Fox News hosts Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. And sometimes, quote, hate watches CNN to get worked up, especially Don Lemon. Don Lemon, he's not the most ardent critic of the president. Maybe Anderson Cooper, among the hosts, some of the guests, of course, are far more critical of Donald Trump. Maybe Jake Tapper, that might make sense. Gee, I wonder why he picked Don Lemon. I can't quite put a finger on it. Anyway, more on his television habits in a second, but it turns out that Donald Trump was asked about this article a little while earlier, because that's what good reporters do. They say, look, here's the information that we've collected. Now we're gonna ask you about it and see, do you agree, do you deny? We wanna get your perspective on it before we run it. So he knew, he gets this whole thing, like 51 things that are gonna go in the article. The thing he obsesses about is how much TV he watches. Oh, the policies, the issues, whatever, okay? But he's really adamant about the TV. So he goes and talks to reporters a little while back when he got the questions from the New York Times, knowing this article was coming out. And he says this, quote, I do not watch much television. I know they like to say, people that don't know me, they like to say I watch television. People with fake sources, fake reporters, fake sources. But I don't get to watch much television, primarily because of documents. I'm reading documents a lot. Okay, anyone believe that? He's reading documents a lot, so he doesn't have time. Well, the 60 sources that the New York Times talked to say that's not really the case. It doesn't matter, you can even look at public statements. Steve Mnuchin is his Treasury Secretary. Here's what he said. He said he really loves verbal briefings. He's not one to consume volumes of books or briefings. In other words, not reading a lot of documents. And as you've seen in prior reports, they condensed all of his briefings to one page, and that didn't work. One page was too much for him. So then they started inserting graphs and pictures. That didn't work. They then had to bring all the information down to tweet size and put his name in it so that he would pay attention. We have a child in office, and I feel terrible every time I say that because I feel like I'm denigrating good children across America. Okay. Now more on TV. For Mr. Trump, every day is an hour-by-hour battle for self-preservation. He still relitigates last year's elections, convinced that the investigation by Robert Mueller, the special counsel into Russia's interference, is a plot to delegitimize him. Color-coded maps highlighting the counties he won were hung on the White House walls. Okay, he's obsessed with himself. No, I won. I had look at all these red districts that I won, and they're just trying to get me. And this is all fight for survival, TV style. In fact, let me get to that. Before taking office, Mr. Trump told top aides to think of each presidential day as an episode in a television show in which he vanquishes rivals. Because that's how he sees the world. I'm in a TV show. Am I gonna get good ratings? Am I gonna win and the other guys are gonna lose? No, being president is far more serious than that. First of all, it isn't supposed to be about you. I know that comes as a giant shock to Trump and maybe even his supporters. You're supposed to be president of all of us. 330 million some odd people. You're supposed to make sure that you're looking out for our best interests. We elected you president to represent us, not to worry about if you vanquish your rivals TV style. The White House is not a reality show, but he literally doesn't understand that because he's obsessed with himself and of incredibly small intellect. So more details from the story that illustrate that. People close to him estimate that Mr. Trump spends at least 4 hours a day, and sometimes as much as twice that, in front of a television. Sometimes with the volume muted, marinating in the no-holds-barred wars of cable news and eager to fire back. Now look, the article has some things that I don't really care about at all. He watches the television in his pajamas sometimes. Who cares? I don't care about it. He drinks 12 Diet Cokes a day. Okay, fine, I couldn't care less. So why do I care that he watches up to 8 hours of TV a day? Because that's a full-time job, 8 hours a day. You're president. The president's the most important job. The presidency is the most important job in the country. He's also the commander-in-chief. And this knucklehead's like, oh, but what did Navarro say about me? What did Don Lemon say about me? Oh, Mika, what did Mika say about me? Who gives a damn? Do your goddamn job. But he can't focus on anything but Donald Trump. Jesus, what a buffoon. Okay, now on to non-television parts of the story. He's dying for approval. So his new chief of staff, John Kelly, remember Reince Priebus was the first chief of staff. John Kelly's become kind of a father figure to him, and he's seeking his approval. So this anecdote. He calls Mr. Kelly up to 12 times a day, even 4 or 5 times during dinner or a golf outing, to ask about his schedule or seek policy advice, according to people who have spoken with the president. Now look, you want to call your chief of staff a bunch of times during the day, great. Maybe that means you're engaged in being president, maybe not so bad. But as they explain, and other reports have explained, no, he's looking for approval. Daddy, did I do it right? Hey, hold on, I'm on the 3rd hole. I'm golfing as usual. But hey, Daddy, I did this. Was it good? Was it okay? Man-child, more on this. Occasionally, the president solicits affirmation before hitting the tweet button. In June, according to a longtime advisor, he excitedly called friends to say he had the perfect tweet to neutralize the Russia investigation. He would call it a witch hunt. They were unimpressed. Man-child. That's your perfect tweet? That you're gonna call it a witch hunt? He thinks that's clever. He thinks, I got him. I've got a great little thing for this. I'm gonna call it a witch hunt. Did I get him, Daddy? Did I get him, Daddy? Now remember, Donald Trump, the only thing he's ever done is to seek his dad's approval because he was a moron. His dad was actually successful. Donald Trump bankrupted himself 6 different times, and every time his dad bailed him out, except for the end when the Russians did. So look into it, I was gonna say, but don't worry, Robert Mueller is looking into it for all of us. Anyway, so his whole life growing up, he's like, Daddy, please approve of something I did. I know I'm a total moron, but please, Daddy, give me some attention and give me some love. So he looks for daddies wherever he goes, I got a great tweet. I'm gonna call it a witch hunt. Is it good? Is it good? Is it good? Okay. Last quote. In almost all the interviews, Mr. Trump's associates raised questions about his capacity and willingness to differentiate bad information from something that is true. Those are his associates, his colleagues, his allies, his friends. And even they say the guy can't tell the difference between a lie and what's true and doesn't really seem to care. That's the president of the United States. God help us all. Young Turks. I know what you're thinking.
I love how you do something with your lips when you play the sound clips.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Look at his lips.
I was a woman.
No, you're closing your mouth. Usually I'll be like, and I'm like, is he like lip syncing it?
I don't know. I never noticed it until you said it.
It's a funny habit.
It's not human intelligence!
TYT member.
They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.
happen easy for me. I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. All my life, I was told no.
You said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Not a lot of time, so I'm going to just read two quick tweets for you. I Am Sock says, who would have thought that Ted Cruz could potentially be not the most hated senator? But Republicans do find a way of outgrossing one another. Mr. Squirrel says, who the hell hate watches something just to get angry? Well, Mr. Squirrel, I got news for you. Almost all of our right-wing viewers. So keeping it real on that front. And yes, today is the first day of Rebel headquarters. It's going to be at 8:05 p.m. Eastern. It's a progressive hub, and we're going to share information with you guys on what's going on in progressive politics and news. Also exciting news, it's double points this week on shoptyt.com.
Damn.
Yes. When you log into a rewards program on shoptyt.com, you share your referral code, share a post about our products, or follow us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, you'll get double the points in return and double the savings on Shop TYT swag is what I am told. And Christmas is around the corner, so do that right now at shoptyt.com. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right.
The wildfires in California have been making national headlines recently, and for good reason. There have been several fires that were difficult to contain. Some of them haven't even been contained yet, and people have lost their homes as a result. But something interesting has come up as a result of these fires that most people don't know about. About 1/3 of people who fight fires in the state of California are actually inmates. And since California has reformed its prison system, there are now less inmates who are available to do the job of professional firefighters. So The Atlantic wrote about this, and it was just such a great illuminating piece that I wanted to share with you guys. According to the numbers though, more than 3,700 men and women and even some juvenile offenders now voluntarily serve on the force. Collectively, they make up roughly 1/3 of the state's wildfire fighting personnel. Inmates also work shifts up to 72 hours straight to contain the blaze and protect the property residents left behind. They do the hard work, such as clearing the brush and other potential fuel, also digging containment lines, often just feet away from the flames. So they're closer to the dangerous components, while other firefighters, the non-inmate firefighters, are usually a little further away and they have the professional equipment to work with. But it's just interesting to see how right now there are politicians and officials in California that are like, oh my God, we don't have enough nonviolent offenders that we're imprisoning to help do this indentured servitude for us. By the way, California inmates receive between 8 and 95 cents an hour. By contrast, fire camp inmates can receive much higher pay, $1 an hour when they're actively fighting fires, and $2 a day when they aren't. Okay, so that's what's going on.
Wait. I want you to understand that. That's not between $8 and 95 cents. That's between 8 cents and 95 cents. So if you think minimum wage is bad, and it is, it's horrific. It's $7.25. That gets you $15,000 a year, okay? Wait till you get a load of 8 cents an hour. So when we're paying people $1 a day or $2 a day, that's not even indentured servitude, that's just slavery. That $1 a day is slavery, okay? 8 cents an hour is slavery. So now we're a little concerned that we don't have enough slaves to put out the fire because we're not imprisoning enough people anymore. Oh, golly gee, that's a big problem. How about you actually pay firefighters? How about that they talk about taking away jobs. Oh, the immigrants are taking away jobs. No, we're locking people up for doing something perfectly normal like smoking marijuana. Then we're using them as slaves, and then you wonder where the jobs are gone. And some of the time, it's private prisons, and they make money off of this, and it's a money-making scheme. And well, we don't get to endanger our lives. We'll just, oh, you smoke pot. You have to go dig the ditch right in front of the fire at 8 cents an hour.
So I want to be absolutely clear about something. The inmates who are allowed to do this type of work have to be nonviolent. They have to be people who don't pose any type of risk to society. They've been in prison for things like drug possession, again, nonviolent offenses. People who have been convicted of rape or murder or who are on death row, death row or life sentences, those individuals aren't even considered for this. So again, these are nonviolent offenders, but also just keep in mind that since they usually end up doing the more dangerous work, they're more likely to lose their lives as a result. So just to give you examples from this year alone, so far 2 inmates have died in the line of duty, along with 1 civilian wildland firefighter. The first, a 26-year-old by the name of Matthew Beck, who was crushed by a falling tree. The second, a 22-year-old, Frank Anaya, who was fatally wounded by a chainsaw. So because of the prison reforms in California, the number of inmate firefighters has fallen 13% since 2008. So again, state politicians, officials, they're scrambling to figure out what to do, and they don't want to hire professional firefighters because that means that not only are they going to have to pay these individuals more, they also have to pay for a pension and all sorts of benefits, and they don't want to do that.
It should be wonderful news that we've lost 13% of California's inmates.
Right.
Hey, there's less prisoners, less crime. That's wonderful. And we're not locking people as many people up as we used to for having a joint. It's like locking people up for having a beer. Oh, we're not. I mean, during Prohibition, beer was illegal. We'd lock people up, and if it was today, we wouldn't just lock them up. We'd send them into the middle of a fire and say, all right, now go work for us for 8 cents a day. So it's wonderful news that California is not doing that. But now that we have the fight, hire people. Hire actual American citizens to do the jobs instead of slave labor.
So the argument is, just real quick, just to get into the numbers, the argument is, well, if we hire actual firefighters to do this job, well then it's gonna cost taxpayers $100 million a year. Well, how much do you think it costs taxpayers to imprison nonviolent offenders? And by the way, you made a really great point about private prisons and how they use this type of slave labor in order to honestly pad their own pockets. But in this case, we're talking about state prisons. We're not even talking about private prisons.
So everybody's gotten used to this now. And so even in a so-called progressive state like California, we're still doing this to people and having them work for 8 cents an hour while they endanger their lives. It's unacceptable. So yes, taxpayers paying more for firefighters is a problem. By the way, one of the reasons we should actually do something about climate change. Now this is one of the largest fires in California history, and it's happening in December when fire season is supposed to be over already, but it's not over because of climate change. So let's do something about that. And by the way, this is one of the public costs that are put on all of us because the oil companies wanted to privatize their profits and maximize their profits, which they don't share with us. They make us bear the cost. But I would rather do that than to enslave more people for doing something as innocent as smoking a joint.
Agreed. All right, let's move on to some other news. The Los Angeles Times analyzed something known as the Brady List. This is essentially a list of cops in Los Angeles who have been either accused or convicted of bad behavior, misconduct, criminal activity. And a lot of these people have not been fired. A lot of these people have served as individuals who testify in criminal cases. And now this question is coming up about whether or not prosecutors or defense attorneys will have access to this database, to this list, in order to ensure that justice is served in cases where these cops are involved. So to give you some more information about this, back in the early 2000s, there were reforms in the LAPD. Under Sheriff Baca, there was a ton of misconduct. And so when the new sheriff came in, they started compiling the Brady List, and the whole point was to kind of keep an eye on cops that might be doing things that are unlawful. Now, the secret sheriff's department list now includes about 300 deputies with histories of dishonesty and similar misconduct. Now, the most recent list that the LA Times was able to obtain was from 2014, so things may have changed since then, but here's what we know so far. Sheriff Jim McDonnell wants to give the names on the list to prosecutors who are required by law to tell criminal defendants about evidence that would damage the credibility of an officer called as a witness. So again, these are people who would testify in these cases. The deputies have been identified as potential witnesses in more than 62,000 felony cases since 2000. In many of those cases, the deputies' misconduct would probably have been relevant in assessing their credibility. Okay, so now let's break down some of the misconduct cases. In one case, there was a cop who lost evidence, and that evidence was a bloodied shirt. So he thought it would be a great idea to take taco sauce, spread it all over a different shirt, and then take photos of that and use that as evidence in a case.
He likes tacos?
I mean, okay. There's also other cases. Let's go to graphic 58. One deputy pepper sprayed an elderly man in the face and then wrote a false report to justify arresting him.
No, cops assaulting citizens and then pretending the citizens assaulted them. I have never. A case like that, look, there's two different kinds of cases here. One is the idiot or corrupt cop, which some police departments actually do want to root out. I would actually say, and this is anecdotal, I don't have statistics based on this, but I would imagine that most police departments want to root out the corrupt cops. Okay, corrupt meaning I'm taking money, I'm doing this, or I'm a buffoon who's putting taco sauce all over the evidence. A lot of that'll get covered up, but in a lot of the cases, they don't want those cops, okay? Then there's a second kind of cases where, I beat the shit out of a guy, and then I pretended that he assaulted me or resisted arrest.
The brutality cases and also the sexual misconduct cases, which are also listed in this Brady list. So one of the other examples was that another cop pulled over a stranger and received oral sex from her in his patrol car. He had alleged that it was completely consensual, but the woman complained about it the day after and said, no, it wasn't consensual. I was afraid. I'm talking about a uniformed cop with a gun, and I felt pressured. I didn't know what to do.
If you think a boss saying let's have sex is non-consensual, and it is, right? There's a power dynamic issue there. Might intimidate the woman, right? Or the guy, depending on the circumstance. Wait till you get a load of a cop asking for sex with a gun, okay? So he's got the gun on him. We've seen what cops do from time to time in America. Yes, that would be coercive. And besides which, she said immediately afterwards, no, I didn't agree to it.
Exactly. So look, at the heart of this issue is whether or not prosecutors will have access to the list in order to do their jobs properly. Because remember, if these cops have been found to make false reports or plant evidence or anything like that, well, that could really have an impact on the outcome of a trial, especially a criminal trial that they're testifying in. And what's happening is the police union is saying, no, we don't want any prosecutor to have any access to this whatsoever. Also keep in mind that the list includes several deputies still with the department who were convicted of crimes, one for filing a false arrest report and another who was charged with domestic battery but pleaded no contest to a lesser offense. And so if you take a look at this graph, it'll show you what the majority of misconduct cases involved. So dishonesty by far is the largest percentage there. There's also family violence, immoral conduct, stealing, and sexual misconduct as well.
So I want to give the sheriff's office here credit because it's easier to go after that first bucket that I talked about, the taco sauce guys and the guys dealing with the drug dealers and taking money on the side. It's harder to tackle the more systemic issue of violence against citizens and then lying about it, or coercive sex with citizens and then lying about it. And here they are taking it on. Now, almost every union in the country has been beat down, except the police union.
Yeah.
They are ferocious, and whereas the other unions could help use some help in actually representing their members against the corporate power, right? In the case of the police, there's no corporations, so no one to crush them. It's just their union versus the citizens, right?
Right. And by the way, I am in favor of unions, even the police union, but there needs to be bounds of reason.
Accountability.
There needs to be accountability, exactly. And so I don't want cops to needlessly lose their jobs when they haven't really done anything wrong. But in cases like this, where you're talking about false reports, when you're talking about planting evidence, when you're talking about sexual misconduct, I mean, really, you're gonna protect these individuals' jobs to the point where they're still able to have input in the outcome of a criminal case. And by the way, this statement by the union drives me insane. So the union representing the sheriff's deputies argues that giving prosecutors the names on the list would needlessly harm the careers of deputies and could jeopardize numerous criminal prosecutions in which they played a role. Needlessly harm their careers? Let me ask you guys something. If you are found guilty of any type of misconduct within your office, would you lose your job?
Yeah, and imagine you go walk into your boss office. Look, I might have stolen a couple of $1,000s worth of equipment, but if you say that to people, it'll harm my career. Yeah, maybe then you shouldn't have stolen the thousands of dollars of equipment, right?
Yeah.
So it's a totally theoretical case, okay? So in this case, some of the stuff was the corruption that I'm talking about with the drug dealers, right? So thousands of dollars, and then you walk in and you go, what, you're gonna ruin my reputation by saying that I took money from a drug dealer? But you did take money from a drug dealer, right? So, and that's one of the many hypothetical cases, not in their case, not hypothetical, but real cases. So that's maddening for a second reason too. So you're saying people who might have been innocent but got prosecuted with the false evidence that these cops worked up on them, we shouldn't let them know because it might hurt the cops' reputation and career?
No, yes.
Yeah, of course we should let them know. By law, we have to let them know that they might have made up evidence against them.
Right, and not only that, they're concerned about the cops' career, But they're not concerned about making sure that justice is really served in these criminal cases, because some of this evidence might be faulty, it might be planted, whatever it is. The witness testimony, if the cop is the one testifying, could be misleading, could be false, whatever it is. Someone could be found guilty of a crime they did not commit as a result of this misconduct. And their argument is, oh, this could jeopardize numerous criminal prosecutions. No, these criminal prosecutions are already jeopardized. Like, there's already an issue there.
And they should be jeopardized because we don't know if they were actually guilty or innocent. And by the way, the last part of this puzzle that's maddening is, so they've in some cases attacked, abused, etc., citizens. That's problem number one. Problem number two is they've might have put away people who were perfectly innocent by making up evidence. Problem number three is now a lot of guys who were guilty might have to go free because we don't know which evidence was reliable and which one wasn't.
Right.
So, and that's also terrible. That's also a miscarriage of justice. But you don't serve justice by covering up all the wrongdoing and saying some were innocent, some were guilty, let's just not tell them. That's not how America's supposed to work. So what has been happening is atrocious, but again, to give credit to the sheriff's department, and as we've told you, not all the cops are the same, not all the sheriff's officers are the same, and in this case, they are taking corrective action for which they should be complimented and lauded.
Absolutely. We got to take a break. Let's do that and come
Okay,
back.
when we come back, evangelical women, we're gonna have strong opinions. They have strong opinions about what morality is. We have strong opinions about their morality when we return.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, we were doing a press release on it and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
No, that's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
People looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views. They said you couldn't do it, you can't change the media, don't try. Well, here we are, we're changing the media. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
What's J&A?
Ja'Cory and Arthur.
You guys share a mug?
Yeah, you both take our hot cocoa black.
That doesn't make any sense.
Plus, I'm right-handed and Arthur's left-handed, so our lips wouldn't even touch the same area. It's perfect.
No, I'm not left-handed.
What do you mean? I've seen you type with your left hand.
Yeah, and also with my right hand. That's how typing works.
All right, post game here in Studio B. It's a green screen magic of internet television.
A lot of condom breaking stories.
Any conversation that starts with marriage is an interesting thing deserves a little bit of.
When the kid cries, perhaps that's that is an opportunity to do some. It's an opportunity to do some parenting.
Yeah, parenting is you cry, you're gone.
Oh my God.
I love that video.
Yeah, Ben, I got a great achoo. You're like, my mouth was open, she sneezed in my eye.
I used to have Donut Tower next to my desk.
Yeah, I'll dress up like a girl.
I sound confident now, Anna. Yeah. When we're off the air, I'm gonna be like, how is this gonna work?
When you get literally asked why 21 straight times.
Yeah.
And like at some point you're like, you're fucking with me now, right?
So I dumped the kids off at her mom's and I drove down to La Jolla for a day.
Get out, kids.
They're like, but daddy, no.
Why? What do you mean why? You asked me to look at you. You did it. You brought it up. You know you're doing it. What do you mean why? I don't know why. I was reading. She's lovely. Here's what's different. Like, it is a different feeling. Everybody says this, but it's 5'11" when we're shooting this. I can't wait to go home. Like that, I can't wait to see her.
What you guys do is allow us to be open and honest, and we don't have to worry about censorship, and we don't have to worry about sponsors telling us what we can and can't say. We're accountable by our audience and our audience only, and I absolutely love that. That's the best part about being a member. We love you guys.
Thing you have in common with your daughter?
I was going to say sex, but I can't relate that.
He said I had small hands. They're not small, are they? I never heard that one before.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Our members of the day are Reed Capelli and Julia Lohr. Today in the post game, which we'll have after Rebel headquarters, I'm going to do two things. One is a story about Janine Pirro that we didn't get to today. And it gets to an unfortunate fact, which we're going to talk about a little bit in the next story. So an extra story for you guys. Plus, I want to talk about something uplifting, which is the movie Coco. I saw it over the weekend with my family. Oh, it's just wonderful.
Really?
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. And then I want to tell you my different family members' reactions because it's hilarious.
Okay.
So tytnetwork.com/join to become a member and check out the post games and get the whole to our show and Rebel headquarters now. One tweet for you guys. Brendan Coates says, the worst part about the firefighter convicts, if they are felons, they can't be hired as regular firefighters when they get out.
Best point that I forgot to make. Thank you. Yeah, that's true.
Yes, so the great irony and injustice of that. All right, what's next, Anna?
Okay. Over the weekend, the name Keaton Jones became a household name in the United States. A viral video was posted, of him, which then went viral. And in that video, Keaton Jones, who is a middle schooler, was talking about his experience being bullied at his school in Knoxville, Tennessee. So here he is, he's just a sweet kid, and you watch the video and he's sobbing, he's crying, he's explaining to his mom what it's like to be bullied. Classmates, he told his mother, had poured milk on him and stuffed ham in his clothes. He was quoted as saying that they make fun of my nose, they call me ugly, they say I have no friends. Why do they bully? What's the point of it? Why do they find joy in taking innocent people and finding a way to be mean to them? People that are different don't need to be criticized about it. It's not their fault. And then at the very end of the video, he says, it'll get better, I guess. And then he just kind of like looks away. He's not even convinced of that. Like, it was just such a heartbreaking video to watch.
Yeah, look, man, as a parent, it's heartbreaking. You also just keep thinking, what could you do? What can you do, right? Because if I heard somebody doing that to my kids, my blood would boil. But you can't get into the middle of a 9-year-old fight, right? And it's so frustrating to have your kids going through that at school, for them to pour milk on them, and oh God, what is wrong with us as human beings, man? For kids, we do have to socialize folks. If we don't, they wind up, unfortunately, we got good instincts as human beings and collaborative in a lot of ways, but we've got some really nasty instincts as humans as well. And unfortunately, some part of our culture encourages that here in America.
Yeah.
It's not like that everywhere.
So there are twists and turns to this story that I will get to in just a second, but I wanted to jump in with my commentary so far on what I just talked about because, and I really hope that he doesn't see this video because it's what I'm about to say is probably discouraging. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. Like this is, no, it doesn't though. This is. I thought it gets better, but it doesn't. We are a nation of bullies. And I'm not saying that every single person is terrible and they're pouring milk on each other. We just elected a bully. We elected someone who consistently on a daily basis does nothing other than bully people, right? Like I think that says something about where we are as a country right now. And do I think we can get better? Absolutely. But think about how professional trolls are now running the government, okay? They're in the president's ear. That's the situation we're dealing with. So at the moment, it's very hard for me to pull a kid like this aside and be like, no, it gets better. Especially when on a daily basis, you deal with rape threats, death threats, people doxing you, people talking about how they're gonna kill you. That's a daily thing, right? And so no, it doesn't get better.
Yeah, so Anna's definitely a little bit more pessimistic about it. I'm a little bit more optimistic about it. But the state of affairs, she's right about. I mean, right now we have unleashed bullies throughout the world, throughout the country, and this is by how fascism started, right? They started bullying the opposition into cowering, and then once they cowered, then they would take away more rights and more rights. And there are monsters out there right now that are going around trying to ruin people's lives and with lies, and they don't care, and they're encouraged by the bully in chief. That he got to be president by bullying everybody, by putting stupid nicknames on them, and didn't matter whether he was right or wrong. He would lie with impunity. He said, now Ted Cruz is a terrible guy, but Ted Cruz's dad did not kill JFK. That is insane. But Trump said that to smear him. Trump had his friends at the National Enquirer write a story about how Ted Cruz had 5 mistresses. He doesn't mind lying. He's a bully, and so he has encouraged every other bully in the country to go wild, and right now they are wilding. So my only hope is that I've seen in my life that, in my experience, sometimes things do get better. Look, it's easier for me to say I was a big kid, and I had a lot of fight in me. So when people tried to bully me, I enjoyed fighting back, and I enjoyed standing up for the smaller kids who were getting bullied. I was happy to raise my hand and say, if you want to fight somebody, I'm your huckleberry, right? And so and it worked. People stopped bullying, and sometimes it takes somebody to stand up, or a couple of different people to stand up, and maybe we encourage each other and stand up together. And I think that's what's going to happen nationwide too. But right now, we're knee deep in bullies. That is true. I see the way out, but it isn't an easy way. But this story also gives you hope because people stood up together.
People did definitely stand up for this kid, and it was heartwarming to say the least. So there were a number of celebrities who saw the video and they wanted to, just offer their support. Delaney Walker, a tight end for the Tennessee Titans, offered Keaton and his family tickets to the team's New Year's Eve game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Other football players also did similar stuff. Chris Evans is another example. He's an actor, of course. He wrote to Keaton and said, don't let them make you turn cold. I promise it gets better. While those punks are at your school deciding what kind of people they want to be in this world, how would you and your mom like to come to the Avengers premiere in LA next year? So, all sorts of sweet offerings. And then there was an individual in New Jersey who started a crowdfunding effort to raise money, and they raised about $57,000, and then there had to be a halt to that fundraiser because people started investigating the kid's family, and they came across a post by his mother, Kimberly Jones, that showed her, I guess, support, affinity, whatever you want to say, for the Confederate flag. Let's just take a quick look at graphic 74, and it'll just show you what people came across. And she also talks about butthurt Americans. If you aren't bleeding, no bones are sticking out, and you can't breathe, stop crying. For the love, some folks clearly never picked a switch. And before y'all start talking to me about metaphorical, emotional, financial, or historical blood and brokenness, don't join a group.
Okay, look, I don't care about her affinities.
Yeah.
And so if you want to have that influence, whether you give money to the family or not, I get it. That's totally 100% your prerogative, and I understand that. But let's not investigate the family, okay? Let's just look, the kid needs help. People offered help, wonderful, okay? Put the money aside. So the football players wanted to help, the celebrities wanted to help. That's great, that's great. I don't care what his mom's political opinions are, and it's not his political opinions, he's just a kid. So stick with your original instinct of helping the kid who needs help. It does, and don't worry about anything else, and I don't want to do what the alt-right does. Well, now let's dive into what the family is and smear them and go after them. Just take the moment for what it is and do the right thing. And I'm glad at least that the kid got a lot of emotional support from people all across the country, including liberal Hollywood, okay? And white people and African Americans and everybody as a country stood up for him. That's a great moment. Let's concentrate on that.
All right, moving on. Penny Young Nance is the head of an evangelical women's organization known as Concerned Women for America. And recently she appeared on NPR to discuss the Alabama Senate race involving Roy Moore. And her argument is that, yeah, maybe an accused child molester is a little better than electing a pro-choice Democrat. Don't believe me? Take a listen.
But here's Roy Moore. He's accused of having had inappropriate relations or even assaulting teenagers, including one who was as young as 14. He's effectively denied everything. Does that make him someone who's worthy of being in the Senate?
Well, I think that's a question for the people of Alabama. I mean, that's what they're going to decide tomorrow. Unfortunately, the Democrats could have won this handily if they'd been willing to put forward a pro-life Democrat. You know, in the past, we had plenty of those, and slowly but surely they've been run out of the party. 2018 is going to be a very close election. The numbers in the Senate are 52-48. I counted about 9 races that would be competitive if they would be willing to support pro-life Democrats.
So she's pro-life so that the kids can be born and then molested by Roy Moore.
Yeah, I wish we could make you guys listen to the full interview because I would argue that it actually gets worse because she makes it clear that she wouldn't vote for Doug Jones because of the fact that Doug Jones is pro-choice. I don't understand the reasoning there. We're talking about living, breathing human beings who have been molested as kids, as teenagers, and for some reason their lives aren't as important as the lives of zygotes.
And besides which, look, I'll get to my favorite Bible quote because all of this is based on the mythology that God is against abortion and he believes that a zygote is the same exact thing as a human being. And that's just not true. It's not true in the Bible. The Bible talks about how God breathed life into Adam once he was born out of the womb, okay? Gave him breath. But besides that, Numbers 5:20-22. But if you have gone astray while married to your husband and you have made yourself impure by having sexual relations with a man other than your husband, here the priest is to put the woman under this curse. May the Lord cause you to become a curse among your people when he makes your womb miscarry and your abdomen swell. May this water that brings a curse enter your body so that your abdomen swells or your womb miscarries. There it is. The Bible is pro-abortion. If they think you cheated on your husband, they will give you a toxic potion that will cause a miscarriage, an abortion. I didn't say that. I think it's a terrible thing to do. But the Bible is in favor of that. Read the Bible. It's not what you consider pro-life. So this is not even pro-choice. It makes the woman drink poison to cause the abortion. But the Bible is definitively pro-abortion. It is. If you're uncomfortable with that fact, that's your problem, not my problem. Read your own Bible.
So Concerned Women for America in the past has been critical of things like same-sex marriage. They've been critical of equal rights for the gay community, for the LGBT community, but at least Penny Young Nance, I can't speak for everyone who's part of this organization, at least Penny Young Nance thinks it's better to vote for an accused child molester over a Democrat. Like, what are you concerned about? Like, your concerns are not worth being concerned about because the things you should be concerned about, you don't think are a big deal at all.
But she believes child molestation is okay because the Bible tells her to be against abortion, when it doesn't even say that. And you're willing to deal with monsters based on that false assumption. It's sickening. All right, we're out of time, guys. Bye-bye. Welcome to the first ever Rebel headquarters, Washington. What is this? Okay, so I'll tell you what this is. This is a show that is meant to serve as a progressive hub. So we're going to have progressive candidates on here. We're going to have progressive politicians, believe it or not, they exist. Later in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's a wonderful progressive fighter in Congress, on the program. We're going to have Congressman Ro Khanna on, and then we'll have candidates like Allison Hartson running against Dianne Feinstein, progressive challengers in a lot of different races all across the country. So some of them will be just Democrats. That's the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Some of them won't be just Democrats or just at the national level. We'll have some local races here. We'll have some governor's races and hopefully some great progressives in that realm as well. But we'll also have progressive organizations on here as well, talking about the campaigns that they're running. What are they working on right now? Looking forward to talking about direct action and keeping you guys up to date on exactly what's going on in the progressive world. So the show will normally have a lot of guests today. Since we're just starting, one, I wanted to get you familiar with the show, and two, it just so happens coincidentally that there is huge progressive news in today's headlines. So I want to talk to you about that and do a couple of those stories. So without further ado, I will get to those stories in 1 second. I just wanted to actually also point out, for the moment being, we're going to still use hashtag TYT live since this is right after the Young Turks to communicate to you guys. There's one break in the show, and after the break, I'll read some of your comments as well. So now let's get to the stories. So over the weekend, the Democratic National Committee's Unity and Reform Commission met final time to actually vote. Now, for about a year, they've been working on different proposals, and up until now, it had just been discussions. But in DC, they got together and had votes, and the results were not bad, not bad, surprisingly decent. Now, it's not as much as progressives would want. For example, I would rather do away with all superdelegates. I think there's no need to have them. Even the Republicans don't have them. But they did do reform of superdelegates among other issues. So let me go to HuffPost here for some updates. They said the 21-member panel, which held its ultimate gathering in a conference room at the Marriott Wardman Park in Washington, D.C., is recommending the effective abolition of some 60% of superdelegates to the presidential nominating convention. Again, I'd like more, but I'll take it. They promised not only unity but reform. Well, that's some reform right there. A little bit more detail on that. Former presidents, former vice presidents, former DNC chairs, as well as sitting members of Congress and sitting governors would retain their superdelegate privileges under the proposal. So the 60% that are losing their privileges have to vote with how their states voted. And so that's good. I would just say there's just no need for superdelegates. Get rid of them all. But the 40% that remain are, as they explain there, members of Congress, former officials, etc. What are they going to do? They're going to override the will of the majority because what? They know better than us? Has the Democratic Party shown that their establishment knows better than regular Democrats or Democratic voters? I certainly have not seen that. I don't think there's very good evidence of that given the enormous amount of losses Democrats have suffered throughout this last decade. And by the way, if you're wondering why they need reform, let me just go over those losses real quick. They lost the presidency to Donald Trump. We could end the conversation right there. But they've also, of course, now lost the Supreme Court because of that. They've lost the House of Representatives. They've lost the Senate in a country that is, according to the polling on issues, largely progressive, significantly progressive. There almost isn't an issue where progressives don't have at least 60% of the country with them. But nonetheless, they've had all these losses. But at the state level, it's even worse. Over 1,000 seats they've lost. And now 68 out of the 99 state legislatures are gone. So now let's go to more of the reforms. The commission proposal would require the state parties to allow voters to register for the first time or switch party affiliation on the same day of the caucus and submit absentee ballots by mail as well as ensure the use of written ballots to confirm the accuracy of results. Now, that's really, really important because that means that more people can participate if they can do same-day registration. Now, some of the states are terrible with this, including New York is the worst. You have to register as a Democrat 6 months before an election. Well, why do they do that? To protect incumbents. Because if there's an upstart that comes in, that is, in this case, they would largely be more progressive and more accountable to the voters rather than the donors, because those upstarts usually don't have a lot of money. Well, the Democratic Party in a lot of places like New York tries to quash that and say, sorry, even though we're yelling at the Republicans for their voter ID laws and for their voter suppression laws, the Democrats have their own voter suppression within the primaries. So this is aimed to fix that. Now, if you notice, it said just caucuses. The primaries are run by the state parties, and so hopefully this then affects the primaries as well. Should be same-day registration everywhere. If Democrats are truly fighting for voter rights and against voter suppression, this should be universal for caucuses and primaries. So one more here. In the final recommendations, the commission proposed a 7-member ombudsman council that included the elected chairs of the DNC's 4 regional caucuses, and I'll explain all this in a second. The Budget and Finance Committee would also include elected DNC members, and all of its members would have to disclose their potential conflicts of interest. Any expenditure of over $100,000 a year to outside vendors or consultants would require committee approval. Its meetings would be open to any member of the DNC, as would the DNC's budget materials. That is arguably even more important than what they decided about superdelegates, and even same-day registration. Because in the past, they have not disclosed their budget to anyone outside of the chair and the head of finance at the DNC. So even their own finance committee, they would say, nope, not gonna tell you what the budget is, which is unbelievable. And in one case, in the case of Donna Brazil, sometimes they would make those financial decisions and not even tell the chair. So then who the hell is running the party? The reality is, there's 5 consultants that are getting the lion's share of all the money. They're running the party. So that's why they don't want you to see the budget. If you saw the budget, you see all the money that they're getting. That's exactly what they're trying to prevent. But when they get the money at the national level to run TV ads, among other things, well, that means other people are not getting the money, like state parties, to do voter drives, to do programs where they knock on doors. So that's an enormous problem within the DNC. That's how they funnel not only big donors, but small donors, some of your money, into the pockets of the elite in Washington, D.C. If they can actually get that done and other the budget, and we can see what is paid out over $100,000, that would be a world of good. Okay, now don't get too excited, it's not done yet. As Daniel Moranz again explains at HuffPost, the reforms are not yet a done deal, however. The commission's report now heads to the DNC's Rules and Bylaws Committee, which will have a 6-month period to amend party rules to enact reforms and could theoretically try to dilute the commission's recommendations, though they would have to run any changes by the commission. And that's not the only remaining hoop. There is one other. The roster of over 400 voting DNC members will also get to vote on the proposals at the full DNC meeting in the fall of 2018. So wait, it's not over yet. They still have to go through these different hoops, and I guarantee you the people getting rich off the current way of doing business will fight it tooth and nail at every stage of the way. But for now, some decent-sized victories for reformers who thought that not just progressives, but that voters should be better represented by the Democratic Party. So it took a long time, but good work by the Unity and Reform Commission. If you want to see clips from that day, TYT Politics also covered this meeting. So go to youtube.com/TYT-politics to get more updates that happened on Friday and Saturday. But shockingly, pretty good news today. So, and it's a good way to kick off Rebel headquarters with surprising good news in these dark times. I believe that we will have a lot more good news to come as Rebel headquarters goes, because then you're going to have more and more primary victories, in my opinion, and general election victories. I know that it hasn't happened in a long time, but when progressives win, it is going to be fantastic. And look, just a quick note on that. We're just at the beginning of this thing. We're nowhere near the middle or the end. I keep going back to that special election that happened in Oklahoma. Actually, we picked up 4 seats in Oklahoma, but the last one was a 26-year-old lesbian mother, completely progressive, in one of the reddest districts, one that Donald Trump won by over 30 points, and she still won. People are beginning to see what Republicans are up to through the health care plans, through the tax cuts for the rich, etc. And if you run real progressives that are uncorrupted, I believe you're going to be shocked by the amount of victories we have. All right, I'm going to take the first break here. When we come back, our own Nomiki Konst is actually on the Unity and Reform Commission, and she lit it on fire. I'm going to show you her clips, they're amazing. And then unfortunately, there is one story of injustice against progressives today, also by the Democratic Party, and I'll share that with you as well when we come back. All right, back on Rebel headquarters. I'm saying that for the first time. I already gotta love this show. Okay, so let me read 2 quick tweets for you guys. Jeremy Kohler says, "Oh damn, I love the Rebel headquarters graphics. The Young Turks are too strong." Thank you, Jeremy. Gabby says, "So the Democratic Party had a vote on whether or not they want to be actually Democratic. I feel like that shouldn't be something that would be up for debate, but unfortunately, as you know, it is." And there's a tweet that doesn't have anything to do with this, and I'm, and I shouldn't care about this, but a little bit. Our petition, tytnetwork.com/resign, is a little bit on fire right now because if we're saying if Al Franken resigned for sexual impropriety, clearly Donald Trump should resign and start to create some pressure. And Mark Ruffalo just retweeted that. So it's always cool to have the Hulk on your side. Speaking of too strong, right? And then in the post game today, I'll tell you guys a funny story about this show. tytnetwork.com/join, of course, to become a member and get the post game. And for all the members, thanks for making a show like this possible. We appreciate it. All right, so let me go to the next story. So the DNC had their Unity and Reform Commission meeting, their final meeting on Friday and Saturday in Washington. And one of our reporters is actually on the commission, so she doesn't report on it. We had Ryan Grimm and Eric Byler report on it for TYT Politics. But Nomi's on the commission because Bernie Sanders basically put her on there. She's one of his representatives as they look to do reform within the party. And she was quite animated when she was speaking about the need for reform. This pretty much lit the internet on fire. So let me show you portions of Nomiki's speech at the Unity and Reform Commission hearing. Watch.
This smells. This doesn't just smell to the public right now that the budget of the party was never put before. Forget about the budgetary committee for a second. Put before the people who have a fiduciary responsibility, whether it's Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, whether it's Donna Brazile when she was chair, when she was vice chair, or Vice Chair Ray Buckley, or Dr. Jim Zogby over here. That's over half the executive committee right there, had no idea where the money was going. We spent $1 billion, lost the easiest presidential race you could possibly imagine with joint fundraising agreements. State parties weren't being funded. During the DNC chair's race, there were some state party chairs who said, I'm an acting executive director and I have $3,000 cash on hand. How are you supposed to rebuild the party if you have no idea where that money was spent? And you know what? I did go through FEC filings, and it doesn't look good. It smells. We're talking about close to $700 to $800 million between the joint fundraising agreement and the DNC being spent on 5 consultants.
Oh man, I love that. So some people will think, oh, well, Nomi, hey, you're not being civil enough. Are you kidding me? She's exactly right. We spent $1 billion and lost to a monster like Donald Trump. If you're not angry about that, there's something wrong with you. You should be furious about that. I mean, they constantly blame Bernie Sanders supporters. What are you talking about? You guys are the ones that misspent $1 billion. And if 5 consultants got that money, well, then I want to see how they're doing because I don't think they're doing very well. That's why they're desperate to keep that budget secret. And that's what Nomiki's been talking about the entire time she's on that commission. That's why revealing what's in the budget and who it goes to is one of the most important things there is. So she's going to talk more about that here.
The number one issue I get asked out in the public by DNC members is, what are you going to do about the budget? It is absolutely ridiculous that we are going to keep a status quo system when it basically says we're going to continue to lose 1,200 seats. Let me describe what losing 1,200 seats looks like, or the remaining seats we have. If you're in Trump, yes, but let's break that down a little bit. If you're in Arizona and you have an ectopic pregnancy, you can't go to a Planned Parenthood clinic because it's gone, because that state legislature is lost. So you have to drive over to New Mexico. And if you bleed to death on the way, you know whose fault that is? In my mind, that's a Democratic Party that wasn't funded, recruiting candidates, investing in local parties. And that is our fault because we have put that money to the top 5 consultants. And part of that has to go to the conflicts of interests. This is outrageous, it's unethical, it's bad governance, and frankly, it's fucking, corruption.
Go get him. It's about time somebody said it. Constable on patrol. So those 5 consultants are not happy about those kind of speeches. So that's why they only had the budget seen by only 2 people at the DNC. One of them was the chair, and oftentimes, according to Donna Brazile, they would even circumvent the chair. So goddamn right, it's about time we found out what's in the budget. How all those people who sent money to the DNC, the big donors, they want to lose their money, that's their business, right? But for the small donors, for all of you guys who sent money because you wanted progressive victories, they did not deliver those victories for you guys. They delivered victories and paychecks for those consultants, but we didn't get what we bargained for. So can we at least see how you spent the money, how you're planning to spend the money in the future, and get accountability? It is the very least we can ask for. Now, one more from Nomiki in this same speech.
the majority of the budget goes to vendors. So we have to have a conversation about who are those vendors. I agree. And that would happen through a budget and finance committee or another committee. But I think what's key is that that committee has oversight and it is elected. Because right now these committees are stacked with whoever the chair decides is on the committee. And I don't know what the chair's interests are because, he's been chair for 8 months. I don't know he's in line with. But we don't have time. We have a freak in the White House and state legislatures controlled by Republicans and poor state party chairs like Jane Kleeb having to go out there and fundraise on her own because the Democratic Party isn't able to allocate money. Well, all that money, we went to presidential races, but it was burned, lit on fire. And who suffers as a result of some consultants getting 3rd, 4th, and 5th homes? The American people. People being rounded up by ICE. Let's keep this in perspective right now. We have a duty here, and it is not just a duty to our committeemen and the status quo. It's a duty to the American people, to the Democratic Party members, to the DNC chairs, to the DNC members, the executive committee members, and the people who have a fiduciary responsibility.
Amen. Amen. Preach it, sister. Teach it. Incredibly proud of Nomiki Konster. Look, this is not a part of her job. It is separate from that. Like I said, we had reporters who went there. Ryan Grimm and Eric Byler covered it for TYT Politics. But I'm incredibly proud of Nomiki for that speech and for her tireless effort to bring accountability to the DNC. And by the way, I'm proud of you guys because Young Turks viewers are what gave the money to be able to hire reporters like Nomiki in the first place. So bless your hearts. And I think she's made a huge difference. I now think the commission has gotten some results and we'll get some transparency to that budget. So that work paid off. There's still a couple of steps left, and we have to keep holding their feet to the fire to make sure that they deliver on that accountability with the budget, also getting rid of 60% of the superdelegates and bringing same-day voter registration, at least in the caucuses. So those are some of the results, but I wish everybody at the DNC would be as fired up as Nomiki so we can actually get real reform so that they spend your money to get you what you bargained for, which is progressive victories. Okay, now I have one story left. Unbelievably, I'm gonna run out of time. Okay, but I'm gonna keep going, it's the first day. Let me give you this story. Wired magazine with a terrific story about how unfortunately the Democratic Party yet again is tilted against upstarts, against progressives, and in favor of incumbents and the establishment. This is about how they restrict access to voting files. So they followed a couple of candidates in this story. They happen to be just Democratic candidates. First one they talked about was Anthony Clark, and they explained his story in this way. They say that Vote Builder, which is one of the things that you need to get access to the voter files, or the voter files, Vote Builder has become the central nervous system of every Democratic campaign, housing years of information on just about every contact the party has ever made with every voter. Developed through a partnership between DNC and a company called NGP Van, the tool gives campaigns the inside track on potential donors, volunteers, or voters out of a pool of thousands, or in the case of a presidential election, millions of people. Now, you can see why that is enormously important. And if you keep it only to the establishment, well, that's gonna, if you will, rig the system in favor of those incumbents and the establishment and the elites. So Izzy Lepowski, writing for Wired, explains, but thanks to an intricate system of state-by-state rules governing who gets access to that data, a system critics say is tailor-made to protect incumbents, some Democratic primary challengers like Anthony Clark are being denied access to this critical pool of information by their own party. And why is that? Well, Anthony Clark explains. He says the machine protects incumbents. What's one more way you can stack the deck against me? Deny me access to valuable information and data. Look, this is an important story and you should check it out for its own merits. But if you're frustrated by it, my opinion is that you should help these guys running as true progressives, strong progressives against the corrupted elites. We'll have links to Anthony's website and how you could donate to him in the description box below. Now let me give you more from Izzy's article. She explains, in Illinois, the state party prevents any candidate running against an incumbent from gaining access to Vote Builder. Why? That's outrageous. There's so many things built into the Democratic Party. Like in New York, you have to register 6 months before the election as a Democrat. If the Republicans had done that in Alabama, we would say, oh my God, voter suppression. Because it is voter suppression. And the Democrats, as they charge Republicans with it, they are right. But within their own ranks, within their primaries, they do the same thing. And sometimes arguably worse in the case of New York and here in Illinois, where they say, I'm not gonna give you any access to Vote Builder unless you're already part of the establishment. It's outrageous. Now, it gets worse. Look, this is true in so many races, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She pays for a voter file, doesn't get what she paid for. We'll have the link to the article down below too. Read the whole article for yourself. Why? She's running against Joseph Crowley, the number 4 Democrat in the House. He controls the system. He's not gonna allow her to have the information, but that's fundamentally unfair. Now, to me, one of the worst cases is in the state of Washington. Sarah Smith running against incumbent Adam Smith. Wait till you get a load of this. In Washington's 9th district, Sarah Smith, a Justice Democrat running a primary campaign against incumbent Democratic Adam Smith, was told that access to Vote Builder required endorsement of 50% of legislative district clubs, +1, as well as backing of the state party chair. But state legislators often wait until close to the actual primary to make an endorsement, Smith says, meaning her campaign would have to spend the majority of the race waiting around for endorsements before gaining access to the data. And even then, the likelihood of sitting party officials endorsing a challenger over an incumbent is low. Basically, what that does is say, you need to win the election before you win the election. But wait, I can't win the election if I don't have access to this voter information. But I can't get the access to the voter information until I win a secret vote, not secret because it eventually becomes public, but a vote of insiders, which doesn't happen until right before the election, and then which good does it do me to have those voter files when it's too late? It is rigged, not in that they are changing votes, but in that they have set the rules against challengers, against primaries, in favor of incumbents, in favor of the establishment. And then they wonder why people are mad at the Democratic Party. That's why. You don't have fundamentally fair processes in place for progressives to mount real challenges. So it gets a little bit more Orwellian here. Smith says she asked to see where that bylaw is written down, but was refused. The Washington State Party didn't respond to multiple requests for comment. In other words, this part is secret. We're telling you can't have access to Vote Builder in this case, but when you ask us why, we say, well, there's a rule that you need to get all this approval first. Well, where's the rule? We're not gonna show you, it's a secret. Preposterous. Okay, at least she can have access to another kind of voter file if she pays for it. It's not as good, and it puts her at a significant disadvantage. But in order to get that access for a separate voter file, she'd have to show that she was denied access to Vote Builder. Here's where it gets the third layer of Orwellian. As a last resort, Sarah Smith's campaign spokesman asked the party for a letter stating that they were being denied access to Vote Builder. At least then they could get access to SmartVan. That's the other voter information pool, right? In response, the Smith campaign says they received a Kafkaesque email claiming that even though campaigns can't access Vote Builder without the endorsements, quote, in our eyes, a campaign that doesn't have endorsements hasn't been denied. So they're like, since we didn't have the vote of the establishment yet in the state of Washington, you technically haven't been denied, so you also can't even buy access to a worse voter database. Gee, I wonder if the system is rigged in favor of the establishment and against progressives that are looking to challenge them. It is startlingly obvious from the facts in this case. So read the whole Wired magazine article, again, description box below, and then check out Sarah Smith, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Anthony Clark's campaigns and find out if you'd like to help, how you can help them. Those links are all in the description box below. All right, guys, this has been the first episode of Rebel Headquarters, and in Cenk Uygur style, I have gone far longer than I was supposed to. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll try to stick to the time in upcoming episodes. And we've got a post game coming up for you guys. tytnetwork.com/join. And Anna will be back. We'll do that post game, including funny stories about the episode you just watched. We'll see you over there. I don't think I'm going to be doing this regularly, but for the first one, bye-bye.